Good afternoon. That's super energetic. So hopefully we get some slides up here in a second. What I thought I'd talk to you about today is a little bit about my story and a lifetime that's been spent building companies and disrupting existing industries, and generally doing it from a background of knowing nothing about each new industry we go into. So once this, well, we'll catch up with the slides. I started out growing up not too far from here, and I was pretty good at building things. And building things for me meant, where my start was, radios and computer software at the age of 8, and then eventually the science fair, the dreaded nerdy science fair. That's kind of where I started. But one thing led to another, and I guess my first big interest was in the world of space and rockets. So I guess you could say I was a rocket scientist once upon a time, because at the age of 16, I won the Nerd Olympics, and I built a high-temperature superconductor-based propulsion system that really replaced the technology for the main booster rocket of the shuttle program. So not bad for a kid that grew up from Hamilton, not too far from here, and that really had no background in the world of physics, rockets, or space. And that was something that, let me skip ahead here, that was something that led to experience with NASA, with Intel, Rockwell Aerospace, Boeing, and really my first exposure to, you can have an idea, a dream, and with some work and some continuous pursuit, turn it into a reality. So that NASA experience led to, I'm just catching up my slides here. They're such good slides, I don't want to waste them. That led to a gig at Microsoft, which, as an 18-year-old seemed like a good thing to do. At the time, Microsoft was kind of they were the biggest and still are among the biggest technology companies in the world. I was speaking about my NASA work on propulsion systems and how software came to the rescue. And someone said, hey, you might want to work at Microsoft, which as an 18-year-old sounded like a good thing. And, we were talking about this thing called the internet and this idea that maybe one day more than 1 billion people might use it. And maybe someday more than just text-based messages like emails would be what travels across the network. Maybe videos, maybe music. And when you got to that world, this idea that the network would need to work so that packets traveling from one part to the other would get to the other part. And we would have voice calls and video calls and all the things we now imagine, we now use as reality. So that was an artificial intelligence based system, and really led to me getting deep into the world of software, so deep that I got a call in my fourth year of university, that time where people are scrambling to get jobs before they graduate. And this call was from a friend named Kimball and his brother Elon on the phone. And they suggested that I should come work for their no-name company that didn't really have an idea of what their product was, a name, or budget to pay me. But they did have a couch. So I decided to drop the Microsoft guaranteed job after university and moved to California. And we built something that you would now think of as a search engine. We didn't know it was a search engine. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we knew that someday people would want to use a service where you could find things like restaurants or products or hotels by just typing into or maybe even talking into a computer. So we built that company called Zip2, and we sold it to Alta Vista, one of the first big search engines that you would remember. Then I got excited about storage and this idea that the internet would form some kind of a cloud. Nobody knew what it was back then. I'm sure people still don't really get what the cloud is today. But this idea that you could store all your files, and that one day maybe photos, music, videos, your business documents would all be available to you on any device somewhere in the internet. That was called DocSpace. We sold that 7 days before the peak of the market in the year 2000. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And that led to the next experience, which was the world of mobile, and this idea that people would be communicating on their phones, but not with their voices. Instead, by sending emails and text messages. We ran 1/3 of global email traffic and the majority of text messaging traffic through something like 400 telecom operators around the world. I moved back to Canada right around that time, late 05, early 06. One thing led to another, and I started getting interested in the world of publishing and this idea that maybe someday publishers and how they work with authors, bookstores, that might not be the actual way that books get created, published, and distributed. So we built a company called Kobo, and in a very short span of time, Kobo became the number 1 or number 2 player in this burgeoning ebook market, being number 1 or number 2 in every market around the world. We very quickly grew from Canada to 190 countries, about 100 million users, 20 million customers, and about $1 billion worth of sales, and certainly more than that in valuation in about 5 years. And that's a company we also transacted to one of the largest e-commerce companies in the world. So with all of that and that experience, you could probably agree that software is absolutely eating the world. It's a Marc Andreessen quote, famous founder of Netscape and now of Andreessen Horowitz. And this idea that over time you kind of build up some pattern recognition in going after these different industries and these different, creating these different companies. The question that I wanted to answer and talk about today is, well, how do you build a disruptive company? How do you disrupt? What does that look like? And I thought I would use my current experience building a company called League as the real live example and just give you a candid view of what it's like and how it's not so rosy all the time. There's more questions than answers, but there absolutely is a pattern in how you do one of these. And in the world of healthcare, I mean, I never even took biology. So I have zero background, and my team, as we got started, got zero background, but I think the principles are the same. So first principle, think bigger. Easy to say, very few people, almost no one does it. And I think the classic, attempt to be innovative inside a bigger company, an incumbent, is absolutely not think bigger in the way that I like to think about it. It's usually more of a modest improvement. Think bigger for me means transform an entire industry, come up with an entirely different model. Let's see if we can help hundreds of millions, if not billions of people, versus create something that impacts 10, 100, a million. One thing you always hear is that's impossible. That's usually like the first hallmark, the first sign that you're onto something. When someone tells you you're wasting your time, this will never happen. That absolutely happened in my last company at Kobo, where 9 days before we launched the company, the CEOs of the largest publishing companies in the world said, "You look like a nice guy. You're wasting your time. This is never going to happen." 90 days later, or I guess 99 days later, ebooks were 10% of sales of all books. And it doesn't take much more than that to completely turn the industry on its head. In healthcare, I got into it because I happened to be in Los Angeles. It was a very random experience where I was late arriving to an event in a room a little smaller than this in the LA Children's Hospital, and I was a day late at arriving to this event, which my wife, who was not late, sitting there without me, was kind of annoyed. But one thing led to another, and airplanes from Johannesburg and Frankfurt didn't let me get there. But when I walked in, and I hadn't looked at the itinerary, Bill Clinton and Patrick Soon-Shiong, a renowned pharma entrepreneur, were talking about the future of medicine. And it was honestly a mind-blowing talk. Way better than this talk. Like 1,000 times better than this talk. It was mind-blowing. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Until they got to the last slide, and they talked about what this meant for the people they could impact. And it seemed to me to be like the 1,000-year technology problem that would take a long time to impact a lot of people. Certainly wasn't being thought of in consumer terms. And I asked the question, well, what does the future of health look like more broadly? How do you impact billions of people with this kind of capability or this kind of thinking? And his answer was pretty simple. We're not consumer guys, and we're certainly not consumer tech guys. We know our world of pharma and medical and dealing with hospitals. So that got me excited. I kind of ran out of the room, and my iPhone was dead. I had to write down the future of health is absolutely going to be more preventative and wellness-driven, more consumer-centric versus hospital and doctor-centric, and technology is going to play a big role. And while I was just about to retire and not do anything for a while and spend time with my 3 daughters, I got going on this new company. And this company is called League, and the name comes from actually the origin of public health policy and preventative health in ancient Rome, where the Roman Senate figured out that if they could get people to live longer, they could raise more taxes. And so, true story. So that meant clean water and garbage/sewage removal, but also personal responsibility for citizens. And they recommended that personal responsibility that everybody walked for an hour a day. And the distance you could walk for an hour a day to keep yourself healthy was called a league. So that's what led to the company. And this purpose, very broadly spoken, is to transform that consumer healthcare experience, empowering people to be healthy every day. Again, very broad, big vision. And again, many people would say, well, geez, 1,000 people are trying to do that. You're wasting your time. As my friend Wayne Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So we got going. And what turned out to be not a year of vacation, turned out to be a year of building a new company. Second principle is focusing on 1% of the 1%. And this is generally the opposite of what people in larger organizations do when they want to go after a new market. Because to move the needle in a large organization, you need big opportunities to go after. Even though that first statement, that think bigger statement and that broad mission or purpose was a pretty big statement, when it comes down to actually figuring it out, you don't start with the biggest parts of the market. Why? Well, often the biggest parts of the market is where everybody else is. So focusing on the 1% of the 1%, the underserved, this is classic Clayton Christensen innovator's dilemma stuff. Focusing on those and super serving them, figuring out a way that the IBMs or the Microsofts or, pick your industry, have not bothered to focus on these guys because they're too small. Figuring out a way to serve them or super serve them and then grow from there is the real trick. And it's tough because it seems very small. It seems like, wow, how's this connected to this giant vision and this big opportunity, this big market? This seems like we could spend all the time on the world on it and all we'd get was a really, really small number. And it turns out that the world of wellness and prevention in healthcare, if you want to go and transform healthcare, no better place to start than wellness and prevention because it is the 1% or less. In the $3.7 trillion spent in the U.S. on healthcare, about $4 trillion across the U.S. and Canada, about half of that spending goes towards diseases that are totally preventable, chronic diseases, but less than 1% goes into actually preventing them. And that was part of the insight that really drove my interest in this category. That seemed completely messed up, and I'm sure there was all kinds of complexities and historical reasons why that was the case, but it seemed like an opportunity to go focus on those providers, the consumer, and the small businesses that were really being underserved and where there was probably an opportunity in the future, where the puck was going. So we centered in on a problem, and what we thought that problem was initially was that health benefits and how you spend money to access healthcare services continue to go up, yet they don't really work for today's consumer anymore. And every aspect of what you do as a consumer to discover health professionals, schedule appointments, get advice, payment, reimbursement, it's all very antiquated. And certainly not a fit for today's consumer. Today's employee, that workforce is increasingly millennial and Gen X, soon to be the majority. It just doesn't work anymore. And it's an industry that, for many reasons, there's a lot of huge incumbents that really haven't moved on these issues or have tried and failed. So, that's a laser, okay. So the third principle is about building technology and iterating fast. The opposite of this is write a great PowerPoint and plan and plan and plan and plan and review that at the next steering committee and review that at the next steering committee and plan and plan and plan some more, and then maybe someone approves you doing anything versus just getting started and iterating. And so we, having done this a few times, we got started and we started building a consumer experience that makes everything from discovering a health provider to scheduling an appointment to paying a matter of seconds. Right from your mobile phone, much like an Uber experience, with cash never trading hands, but it happening magically in the cloud, so to speak. And that's something, you could pick any one of those pieces and find quite a bit of pain in how the consumer experiences them today. Imagine filling out a reimbursement form and waiting to get a claim reimbursed with your insurance company. Takes way too long, costs way too much money in general. And for that reason, most people don't love their insurance company, with a 12% net promoter score average across the industry, which is terrible. So we built that. Then we built an Amazon-like healthcare marketplace. Really, and this started with, a few wellness and preventative services, but once people saw what we were building, it attracted almost any kind of health and wellness, and to a recent degree, medical provider to list their profile, their services, price them, connect their scheduling or calendaring or booking system, connect their bank accounts or how they expect to get paid, and adding this concept of decision support, location-based information, ratings and reviews, and pricing, a lot of things happen. First of all, quality rises to the top. Secondly, prices tend to compress, and you'd be amazed how much disparity in pricing there is across the same service or category of healthcare, even within a neighborhood. And once you have a marketplace, marketplaces tend to change all of that. So we built that. Next, and to back that up, we built a provider network, people that were a part of that marketplace and would participate. Provider networks are very common in the US. Here, we're more accustomed to going to pretty much anyone, unless we're getting a referral from our doctor, in which case we generally go to where we're sent. And behind that, to make that all work for the provider, there's a whole provider platform, like a mini SAP for the provider, although not that complicated. A way to manage their patients, a way to connect their calendar, their payment, list services, market, etc. And then we built the piece that connects the employer, so that the employer could log in, sign up, and create benefits, health benefits for their staff, and issue them as an alternative or as an add-on to their existing benefits within a matter of minutes. When I set up my last company, it took us 9 weeks to get Great West Life to set us up. So, pretty big difference. This was built so far in 73 week-long sprints, a sprint being a quantity of effort, with weekly course adjustments. The plan was never to build what I just showed you. We just kind of figured it out along the way, with a team that pretty much can build anything. And with a team that is willing every Monday morning to throw out everything. they had just built, whether it was over the last couple of weeks or the last 73 weeks, and start fresh each week. A very different approach from how things are typically done. Number 4, a relentless pursuit of viability versus the opposite, which is, well, our business model, because we're experts in this company or this organization, and we know best how to do this, and it is what it is, and we're just going to go with that business model, and it's going to work. We always go with this idea of we have no idea how it's going to work, and we're open to it being anything but the norm or what experts tell us. And so you've probably seen this diagram before. Success is often not a straight line, but this kind of circuitous path often looks like, the random walk or Brownian motion. After a bunch of years of doing this, I kind of think of it more like this, in which case, you have this idea, it's exciting, you get ready to launch, your mom gives you a hug, everyone thinks you're awesome, you come off that high very fast, and you enter the pit of despair, which is a very depressing place to be. And most companies never get out of the pit of despair, because the pit of despair is very depressing. You question yourself every day, is this market really here? Where are these customers? Why is nobody using this? Why is this breaking all the time? Why will nobody pay? But if you keep iterating in this continuous pursuit of viability and figuring out product market fit, you may land onto the path of enlightenment and make your way out. And then if you're so good and lucky, you hit the elbow of the curve and you take off, which is exactly where we are right now with this new company. And it's kind of really started to crystallize into traditional health benefits are a pain. We've built this brand new kind of digital health benefits company, and it turns out you don't have to be an insurance company, and you can provide health and wellness, you can provide choice, you can provide convenience, and it's plain simple and offers savings to both employers and employees, which if you're a company where health benefits have gone up 130% in 10 years, the last 10 years, that sounds like a pretty good deal. And it's all backed by this end-to-end platform, which looks like all the same components you would find in a giant insurance company, but we built it all new, all digital, and the cost of moving a dollar from one end to the other, from the employer or sponsor that typically pays to the end provider, is pennies through our platform, versus imagine your dental bill and how you get that reimbursed. That costs dollars or tens of dollars to move through a traditional model. So there's a giant market. It's trillions, over 100 billion for us in our focus initially in the US, and it's now a massive thing, disrupting this world of health insurance with an all-new digital platform, and we absolutely did not start there. And if you told me a year and a half ago, you're basically going to be an insurance salesman, I would have said, there's no way I'm doing this. I'm not interested, and I don't believe you. And so we've taken what we've done and started packaging it for employers, and they can start small, they can grow, but it's completely transparent. What it costs is essentially what the provider services cost, less the discount that we apply because we have scale, and we charge a very small fee. And it's completely transparent, and you only get charged on what you use. And you can start with wellness, you can go to health spending accounts, or full on group benefits. So software eating healthcare tends to look more like figuring out how to make the money and the experience move better versus perhaps a physician through your computer or through your cell phone. And it turns out you can start to change a lot of things once you start to compress the distance a dollar needs to travel and just make it a lot easier and cheaper for everyone. Fifth principle, with a minute to go, compete or perish, which is the opposite of I'm going to do this and it's going to be awesome. I'm not going to worry about competing because we're the best company in the world. You often have to compete against Goliaths, and you cannot do that playing Goliath's game. You have to play David's game, which is generally leveraging your size, being smaller, focusing on things that are way too small for Goliath to care, and focusing on your speed, which as a small, nimble player you generally have. So that means looking at names like this, you have to be prepared to either become a valued partner or a clear and present threat and danger to them. And deliver that with as much conviction as you can when you're speaking to the CEO of any one of these companies, which they either think, this guy's either crazy or we're screwed. So last but not least, own the podium, which is the opposite of we're going to do this because we're going to grow a little bit. It's going to be interesting. Own the podium is about being in it to win it. And so having a team, most importantly, that can help you there, help you break through barriers, break through these different challenges along the way, have the persistence to get through the pit of despair. It's good to have that. And like making movies, you make a good one, the team wants to get back together again. The same is true with in the world of technology. We've worked together for a long time. Even better than that, though, is, this would go next, this important point, that 20 people competing against a company of tens of thousands of people could be extremely dangerous. And if you're an incumbent, you often think the opposite. These 20 guys know nothing, and we're going to crush them. They're a nit. So the opposite has always been true in my experience. And this last point of, if you're going after this new market, new opportunity, there's almost always only 3 players on the podium, right? It's like an Olympic demonstration sport. It might not make the next Olympics, but no matter what, it's a global endeavor, and nobody ever remembers number 3. Right? So if you're in it, you got to be going for number 1 or number 2. So how do you build a disruptive company, period, or a disruptive company in the world of healthcare? 6 principles: thinking bigger, focusing on the underserved, getting right down to business, building tech and iterating fast, a relentless pursuit of viability and the willingness to throw out any ideas you had in the beginning about how it would all work. This idea that it's not just about building, but you are entering the ring. It's about competing or perishing. And then lastly, you're in it to win it with this own the podium type strategy. I'll leave you with this one quote, which is kind of how I think of disruption. I used to think it was from the movie Inception, and I've told maybe tens of thousands of people that. It's not from the movie Inception. You can look it up. It's some famous poet. There are those who are dreamers, and then there are those that are stuck in reality. But then there are those that can turn one into the other. And if you're going to be disruptive, whether it's in healthcare or whatever your business or organization is, you either need to be one of these people or you need to find one or more of these people and bet on them. Thank you very much.